Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog here, aka the Blue Blur, aka Blue Justice. And I am Mario here, and we are from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll present you with some sort of a mini series of Let's Plays through the majority of the forms of not only for today, but also for next weekend as well. Because, as you probably already know, about the fact that recently, during the forms of this year in particular for 2024, will marks the 30th anniversary of the game's release of the original Donkey Kong Country. Well, it wasn't until whenever we get to November, that is. Oh, right. So we figure when Miles able to actually start to be playing through not only one, not two, but three classic original Donkey Kong games originally came out on the arcade machines, and in addition to that, we also decided able to tackle through the NES version as well. So just like the forms of how it does it in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat back in Journey forms of in 2020, that we've decided able to tackle through two versions in particular within 3 games combined. So because of that, and the first game we're going to be tackling through for the sake of the forms of those mini-series of Let's Plays, and we're about to get started with the one and only started it all, where it comes the forms of the existence of Donkey Kong, but it's also with the first ever appearance of Mario, or should I say Jumpman, because as far as I'm aware, back in the day, that obviously though we will able to discuss more about it if we somehow manage to get this game started, specifically the arcade version first, and then later on though we'll play the NES version just for the sake of able to compare between these two versions. So because of that though, now as you can tell from the actual screen resolution on the arcade version is that the version we're going to be playing on is the Nintendo Switch version for the likes of the forms of the Arcade Archives version. So because obviously if you couldn't tell already, that if you're trying to able to play the game on handheld mode, or to be more specifically, if you're trying to able to set up with the actual screen display, then if you're trying to able to actually go for a full horizontal mode, then obviously though, it will just be incredibly awkward. So we figure we was able to set up as the forms of vertical position, that it fits the forms of the arcade cabinets. So because of that though, yeah, let's get this thing started, shall we? So of course, we're able to take turns for the sake of the forms of this entire playthrough of Donkey Kong, not only for the arcade, but also for the NES version as well. So since no matter what though, this is the Arcade Archived version of Donkey Kong Original, this means in order able to actually add some bit of credits into your playtime, we have to press the L button, and in order able to play the game, you have to press the R button on your controller. So definitely a little bit weird, but regardless of such though, I believe it's your turn first for Mario, and then once Mario's run is done, obviously it will be my turn next. So let's get to it with Donkey Kong. Originally came out in 1981, so obviously the actual main plot as well as the premise of this game is actually pretty simple, where basically though we have to go all the way up to the top of the level, and it's your job to able to tackle through 4 levels in the arcade version, whilst compared to the NES version only has 3 levels. So basically though we have to traverse into 25M, and as well as 50M, and alongside with 75M, and finally 100M. In some cases 100M is the final level of the game. So because of that though, yeah, as you can see on screen, that Mario did accidentally die at first glance, mainly because no matter what though, it's been an awfully long time since we've last played Donkey Kong, not only for the NES, but also on the arcade machines as well. Although technically though, Sonic, the last time we actually did play this game was back on Donkey Kong 64. Oh yeah, because of one of those challenges you can able to find, not only for able to try to get the golden banana, but also get the Nintendo token, so, or Nintendo coin to be more specifically. So, yeah, anyway, so in order able to actually take control of Jumpman, as was known back in the day, then basically though you have to press the left and right buttons to move around, and then press A or B buttons to jump, and that's all there is to anything about it. Even though generally there's only like one specific button you can able to press on the arcade cabinet. So every once in a while though is about the fact that you can able to pick up the hammers, so that way you can able to demolish not only barrels, but also with certain hazards as well. Like for instance, about the fact, as you can tell, that every time when these barrels did somehow manage to get into this oil can, basically though, it'll turns the actual barrels into fireballs, which we definitely need to avoid at all costs. So yeah, every once in a while though is about the fact that we will admit though right away that the controls is not that very perfect to me though, but regardless of such though, as you can see, that Mario did somehow complete the first level, which appears to be 25M, and as you can tell, he's now moved on to 50M, where basically not only he's just gonna have to come across into those bunch of ladders, but also with conveyor belts, and on top of that, we need to avoid pies. So yeah, and as you can tell, no matter what though, we can able to just go ahead and— oh, come on! Oh, jeez, that was my run anyway. So, but at the very least though, I did somehow manage to able to came into— oh wow, I was in second place. So, and I was literally so close to become the #1 after all. So, I guess no matter what though, I should probably put my name on here, so just in case I can able to just save that into my record leaderboards or anything else to be more specific, even though that this entire run is not the best, because like we said this before, it's been ages since we've last played this game for sure, technically from the likes of in Donkey Kong 64 for one of those challenges, as what I've already mentioned about this before. So now it's my turn now to able to tackle through the arcade version of Donkey Kong before we move on to the NES version. So let's see how I roll. So anyway, in terms of the forms of how the fact that what the characters actually represented for this game in particular, that obviously though is about the fact that, like we've already established that before, that basically though is about the fact that back then that you're able to take control of Jumpman, or usually every nowadays that everyone calls it Mario. So generally speaking though, it's about the fact that this is technically Mario's first ever debut. So alongside with the forms of, well, let's just say Donkey Kong, well technically speaking though, that's not necessarily the case, because obviously, if you couldn't tell, that particular Donkey Kong, about the fact that he just constantly tossed the barrels at us, well actually as it turns out, it was actually known as Cranky Kong. Well, aside from the fact that the actual origin is a bit difficult to explain, but I digress. So now it's my turn to tackle through 50M, where basically I have to dodge not only pies but also with fireballs while trying to deal with those conveyor belts, and as well as these extendable ladders. So, and I think fundamentally speaking though, Sonic, this is the only level on the NES version that particular stage has been removed on the NES version, which you'll see what I mean if we tackle through the NES version. So as you can see, Sonic did somehow manage to tackle for that stage no problem. So anyway, so now I'm moving on to 75M, where basically this particular level looks a bit familiar to me, because it not only did somehow make its appearance as a stage, not only in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, but as well as the forms of Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U, as well as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So because of that though, yeah, originally we did somehow did this game back in during the forms of in our 7th year anniversary back in 2018, while we only toggled through the NES version. So as a result, again, we'll explain more about that, and as you can tell, I've now made my way rather, to the final level in Donkey Kong on the arcade version. So here we go, 100M. So basically, in 100M, is that we need to get rid of these little dissolved platforms, or these little breaky platforms, if you couldn't tell, because once you manage to try to get rid of all these little blocky platforms, then obviously though is about the fact that you're able to actually save Pauline, or the girl, as was known back in the day, but usually we attempt to call it Pauline during the forms of being later on throughout its lifespan, but for its origin like this is actually pretty impressive for the time, especially noticeable because obviously though, did you know about the fact that once we get to the forms of in 2031, that obviously this game will be 50 around that time. So yeah, time flies, doesn't it? Yeah, especially noticeable because obviously about the fact that the 40th anniversary has already been happened since in 2021 for sure. So Anyway, so this where things gets a little bit difficult for me, especially noticeable because as you can tell, those weird fireball creatures decide able to move sporadically. So generally speaking though, there might be a couple of times that I might get cornered at one point, and oh jeez, that was close. Ah, gosh darn it, there's my first death of my run. But that's okay though, because obviously I still got, let's just say, I believe I've only got 3 lives to go. So generally speaking though, Sonic, is about the fact that luckily, unlike in Donkey Kong 64, that you only have 1 try in order able to keep on, like, doing successful runs. Specifically, if you're trying to go after the forms of not only the golden banana, but also with the forms of the Nintendo coin as well. So generally speaking though, I don't have to worry about the forms of some bit of archaic, frustrating experiences after all. So, although then again though, sometimes the controls is not exactly perfect per se, but for its time though, it does manage to age kind of not well enough for my honest opinion, because I'll admit it though right away, I'm pretty much used to with the superior counterpart, which appears to be Donkey Kong 94 for the Game Boy, because it does have multiple movesets, and on top of that, the momentum is actually way more fluid. But that's just me, so it looks like about the fact that you seemed able to just, well, died for the second time on this particular stage. Yeah, I know that. So, anyway, so there are quite a few things I want to mention about this. It's about the fact that, well, today's date, of course, there is the 21st of April today. In some cases, in 2024 today. So naturally speaking, though, only 5 more days to go until Knuckles the series on Paramount Plus is going to be releasing, well, technically 6 days on the UK version, because as far as what Pac-Man has already mentioned about this before, about the fact that we have to wait for a little bit longer until that particular series is eventually going to be coming out during that some point in next week. I apologize for that particular belginess, I'm afraid, guys, because yet again, I just can't help it for myself of how much I love those chili dogs so much. I mean, usually that's how I usually think about it anyway, so, alright, let's just see if I can able to just try to make it. Alright, I saved Pauline from the likes of Donkey Kong himself. So congratulations to you, Sonic, that you somehow not only beat me for its high score, but in terms of progression-wise, you did somehow manage to complete the first run. So now I ended up on the second run where we have to go through the exactly same stages as before, except the time limit, specifically, with that bonus counter represents the timer, because if you let the bonus thing runs out for its timer's sake, then obviously though you will die. So as a result, yeah, that's as far as we can able to say about the forms of the arcade version of Donkey Kong. Yeah, it was actually quite fun to able to actually just to play this game again. Specifically the arcade version, since the Donkey Kong 64 of one of those unlockables you can get if you're trying to keep on collecting some more banana fairies, which, gee, I can't even believe it's been about a year ago since we did somehow tackle through Donkey Kong 64, thanks to, I believe Maxi did somehow tackle for that game, didn't he? Yeah, I believe so. So, yeah, it looks like I am the number 1, so as a result, it's time to put in my name on here. So, yeah, with that being said, folks, that was it for the arcade version of Donkey Kong. And I have no idea why I accidentally select B as opposed to C, so there we go. So, yeah, that was quite a lot of fun, despite my rough performance for my turn. But I'm sure enough, though, Sonic, you did really, really well. Thanks, Mario. So let's move on to the NES version now. So we'll meet you guys there. Alright, here we are on to the NES version, where, as you can see, that we somehow booted up on our NES Classic Mini, because we originally did this game back on the Wii U Virtual Console re-release version back in 2018, because obviously, despite the fact that that particular playthrough is no longer there anymore, mainly because the quality itself looks very, very ugly, especially noticeable how the fact that most Virtual Console games, specifically on the NES games running on the Wii U, that not only is incredibly gloomy, but it's also about the fact that it's also kind of dark too. 2. So generally speaking of Mario is about the fact it's a good thing we did somehow choose the NES Classic Mini version, because not only the sprites look a bit brighter, but it's also about the fact that the actual colors look very, very vibrant. So because of that though, yeah, as you can see on screen, that we can able to choose between 1-player or 2-player mode, just like the forms of how it does in the arcade version, except there are 2 different types of modes you can able to play around with. There's Game A as well as Game B. So I'm sure enough though, much like the arcade version, we'll once again get to take turns. So in some cases, it's Mario's turns to start with, and he's going to be selecting Game A, according to what I've noticing that when he accidentally pressed the start button. So, and meanwhile for me though, I'm gonna be toggling through the Game B. So, after all, I did somehow complete the first run on the arcade version, so I'm pretty sure that Mario might able to actually redeem himself for able to try to toggle for the first run on the NES version. Now, believe it or not though, Sonic, there are a whole bunch of versions of Donkey Kong these days. Or technically ports, because potentially speaking, we've already experienced the original arcade version, but there was also the forms of so many ports of Donkey Kong, ranging from Game & Watch, Atari 2600, Intellivision, ColecoVision, Kilogo Mini Arcade, Atari 8-bit, Famicom/NES version as what the version we're going to be playing through right now. And speaking of which, as you can see, about the fact that since I'm now on to the second stage in this version of the game, so this means that 50M was not appeared on the NES version, whilst compared to the arcade version, does have 50M. So this means no matter what though, the NES version is actually a lot shorter than the forms of how it does it on the arcade version. So, and obviously if you couldn't tell, once you complete certain stages though, there's no well-animated scenes in during forms of the arcade version. So whilst unlike the arcade version, I will admit though, is that the actual specific cinematics is actually pretty well animated. So, but even then though, that's besides the point. So, oh yeah, and every once in a while it's about the fact that you can able to pick up a hammer, so yet that way you can able to demolish not only the forms of those barrels, but also with fireballs as well. So generally speaking though, if you really want able to protect yourselves, well, obviously though, we have to be very, very cautious with how this game actually has to offer. Like, for instance, if you dare touch an enemy, then you die automatically. So, you know, just like the forms of how it does it in, there's also another arcade game called Mario Bros, where basically though, I think it's probably best if we save that particular topic until for later time, if we decide able to actually go ahead and get the arcade archives version of Mario Bros. During at some point in the future. So potentially speaking though, my first run is complete during my perspective. So as a result, yay, I somehow rescued Pauline on the NES version. So, and just like the arcade version though, we're going back to square one. So as a result, I'm going back into 25M. So, yeah, that's the main objective on this basically. So anyway, there's also with the forms of Commodore 64 version, as well as the forms of TI 99/4A, and there's also with the forms of IBM PC, and there's also MSX, and there's also ZX Spectrum, as well as the forms of Amstrad CPC, and there's also Atari 7800, and there's also Apple II, and there's also Nintendo e-reader as the accessory to the Game Boy Advance. And finally, speaking of the Game Boy Advance version does exist anyway, for the parts of the forms of the NES classic games. So, yeah, quite a lot of versions out there, including certain re-releases during the forms of not only for Nintendo Wii Virtual Console, as well as the forms of the 3DS Virtual Console, and heck, even especially noticeable, we've already mentioned about this earlier, there's the Wii U Virtual Console re-release, and as well as the forms of special bundles with the forms of specific game systems. So, and there's also the Arcade Archives version on the Nintendo Switch. So, yeah, that seriously is quite a lot of versions, which we probably already know about that already. So, and yeah, nothing else we can really say about the forms of how Donkey Kong actually plays out. Not only the arcade version, but also with the NES version as well. So, yeah, with that being said, folks, let us know in the comments down below. for the question of the day. Which specific version of Donkey Kong do you guys play? Did you really play the forms of any other versions as far as curiosity's sake? Or if you managed able to experience the arcade version and as well as the forms of the NES version as well? So, on the latter of the actual subject for that matter, we did somehow manage able to experience both versions of the game, basically. One on the arcade game, as well as the NES version, just for the sake of familiar sound effects we pretty much used to at this point. So, yeah, and every once in a while, though, on 75M, as you can tell, that I accidentally touched the spring, which obviously, though, if you dare touch the spring, you die automatically, though. So, yeah, that's as far as we can able to say about this, basically, though. So, but of course, as soon as we get to next weekend, on the other hand, not only we can able to tackle through Donkey Kong Jr., but also Donkey Kong 3, the most forgotten Nintendo arcade game that's ever existed of. Well, that's just mainly because nobody actually heard about the forms of Donkey Kong 3, so we'll able to discuss more about that if we tackle for that game, both on the arcade version as well as the NES version, so we can able to tell the difference between both of those versions in particular. So, but anyway, oh yeah, there's also another thing I want to point out as well. Unfortunately though, me and Mario got pretty annoyed recently, but that's just mainly because, sadly to tell you, the actual laptop's battery has been completely, well, let's just say, well, it still managed to work, even when it's when it's plugged in while it's charging. However, though, the most annoying aspect for us, though, is that the actual percentage meter does not increase. So that means is that the battery has been completely faulty. So because of that, though, yeah, we'll try to sort things out eventually, though. But we shall definitely see what happens in the forms of the current result. So, but as you can tell, about the fact that Mario did somehow pick up not only the Pauline's bag, but also with the forms of the Parasol as well. Which obviously, if you do manage to pick those up, obviously though, it just gives you some bonus points, and that's all there's to really expect. Because unlike in Donkey Kong 94, it actually leads you to the bonus game you can able to grind extra lives with. So, yeah, that's all you're able to actually think about this, I guess. So, but then again, though, we did originally play the NES version back in 2018 to able to celebrate the 7th-year anniversary of the Mexi Toys YouTube channel, and as you can see, my run is over. So, at least I did pretty well enough, though, like 39,000 points on my run. On the NES version, yeah, kudos to you, Mario. Especially noticeable you did surprisingly well on the NES version compared to the arcade version. So, now it's my turn to tackle through Game B, and the blue blur is on its job. So, anyway, because that's what you're saying, Mario. Oh yeah, exactly. Because originally we did somehow play this on the Wii U Virtual Console re-release version of Donkey Kong on the NES, and no matter what though, it's just about the fact that obviously that video is no longer there anymore, not only because about the fact that the amount of views is actually really low, but it's also worth noting for us about the fact that the actual quality, like where Mario has already established that before, is actually really, really bad. So, thankfully though, in Journey forms of in this year in 2024, the quality is a massive step up from the likes of the forms of how it does it since in 2018, basically. Ah, dang it, I did not jump! Ah, darn it. I had to get a lot accustomed to the forms of the specific controller setup, so... But obviously though, we're going to be playing the game on the NES controller, to be more specific with that particular hardware in mind, so... But, yeah, that's as far as we can able to say about the forms of today's subject. Although, we would have liked able to explain something else for that matter, though. But let's just say we'll let someplace else we're able to mention about the forms of other topics at this point in a future time. So, for now, it looks like that Sonic is now on to 100M, but this time on the NES version. So, I wonder if he might as well able to succeed for this point. So, just like in the arcade version. So, ah, darn it all, that fireball is in the way. Ah, jeez Louise, man. So, yeah, nothing else to really say about that, I guess. So, but of course, if you do manage to able to reach for about, let's just say, 1,000 points, or 10,000 points in particular, I'm pretty sure you get yourselves an extra life. So, yeah, nothing else I can really say about it, I guess. So, even then though, what I found was a little bit odd is that during the forms of the actual, the Mario's, name signature, back in the day that is that did you know that the original surname for Mario was actually by the forms of Mario Seek Ali, which, as it turns out, I have no idea what I explain about this though, personally though, because it's been a, you know, a very long while since we've last played this game as the forms of in Donkey Kong 64, so, yeah, technically speaking though, not just by the forms of in the original, well, you probably get the idea for this point right there, Mario, so either way, so, yeah. Oh, you're not doing too shabby right there. Why can't I grab the parasol? Okay, whatever. I'm just gonna have to ignore that for now. And able to actually try to get that last block right there. And there we go. My first run has been completed. So I already know for a fact that Mario did somehow manage to able to complete 2 runs in Journey forms of the NES version. So, yeah, that's always something, I suppose. So, anyway, so now it's your turn to go on to round 2 in the forms of the Donkey Kong NES version. So, yeah. I wonder if I can able to beat Mario's score, but I highly doubt it because obviously though that I'm pretty much more accustomed to the Switch Pro controller sometimes on the Arcade Archived version. So, anyway. Oh, jeez, that was close. Oh yeah, you can able to actually jump over barrels if you want, so you have to be so precise with that jumps in mind. So, which that could be also applied to the forms of Donkey Kong Jr. by the way. So, but then again, we'll talk more about that game during at some point until on next Saturday for sure. So either way, and it's also worth noting folks about the fact that yes indeed, that yesterday, oh come on, my jump button has not been active. Oh my god. Anyway. As what you saying, Mario. Oh yeah. That recently Pac-Man, he's now recently finished up everything for Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure for the Game Boy Advance. So as far as I'm aware, we'll might as well say this right now, we definitely deserve a break for playing Winnie the Pooh games for the time being anyway, because after all, we've already did tackle through 4 of those games in particular, with 2 games with 2 different versions in particular, so it's probably best if we decided able to play something else, don't you think? Yeah, like, let's just say we haven't touched upon a Zelda game for some time, since Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link or something, or perhaps even maybe we haven't touched upon a Metroid game for some time or something, so either way. Oh, jeez, I wasn't thinking straight! Oh well, game over for me. So you did somehow beat me to it, Mario. Yeah, I digress. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching of our Let's Play of Donkey Kong, released in 1981. So this is me, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Mario here. And join us next time, we're gonna be tackling through Donkey Kong Jr. So I'll see you guys until next weekend. Later, fellas.